But let's talk about the highs and the lows of Ferrari's weekend. And it's very clear what we're talking about. Charles Leclerc had an incredible weekend. Let's be honest. I think he qualified first, led every single lap, set the fastest lap, and I think he went highest in every session as well. I think it was a Grand Slam for Ferrari, which they failed to achieve for many, many years. I wonder if you've got the statistic there. That's the kind of thing you would have. But it's been a long time since they've achieved that Grand Slam. And on the other side of the pit wall, you've got Carlos Sainz, who struggled in qualifying, not through any fault of the team, because he did have I think he had a steering wheel swap out during qualifying, or a steering wheel issue, so they switched it out. So he didn't have all the configuration on his wheel set up, so that's why he did botch that, first or second attempt. But at the end of the day, it's qualifying. You've got to be able to do it when you need to do it. It's a one. Sometimes it goes down to the final lap, and it's whoever can hold the pressure the most will come out on top. So Carlos is in a bit of a sticky situation because his teammate is excelling at the moment, is really doing quite well. He started off the 2022 season perfectly. There's no doubt about it. Won 2 races. I think he finished second in Bahrain. So he's doing a very good job, whereas Carlos is slowly starting to play second fiddle, and it's definitely not what he wants to do. He doesn't want to become the Bottas to the Hamilton, does he? Because look how that paid out. But I do have some concerns. I'm not saying it's all over and done with for Carlos Sainz, because he's an incredible driver, and we've seen some great stuff from him in Ferrari and in previously in McLaren. But he really does need to get it together. And unfortunately, during the race, this is where he did have a steering wheel swap out. He went into anti-stall on the start, so he dropped a fair few positions there, and then was fighting back markers or the midfield pack for the first lap, and then on the second lap he just went far too deep into the sharp left-hander, that chicane we were talking about at the end of what would have been the third DRS straight, went across the grass. And he didn't seem to lose any momentum going across the grass. I'm not quite sure whether he was trying to brake or not, or whether he was just trying to carry that momentum onto the tarmac to make sure he didn't lose a position. But unfortunately, he spun on the grass, went across the track, narrowly avoiding some cars, and then ended up beached on the outside of turn 10. And he just couldn't do anything. He was over the radio asking if someone could push him. I'm not sure that's within the spirit of... I don't think they can. Especially with all the electrics running through the car. I don't think any marshal's going to want to go out and push a live car back onto the track. What a weekend for Ferrari. It's the highs and lows of Ferrari. What's your take on it? Like you've just seen the highlights. I'm sure it was covered quite a lot with Leclerc and Carlos.
Well, I do have one Ferrari statistic.
Okay.
Which is that Leclerc's win, which was by some 20 odd seconds. I think it was about 20 and a half seconds. It's like the biggest win for Ferrari since like Schumacher in 2004. So it was a decisive victory. Decisive for Leclerc. I got to say that it's always been pretty clear to me that Leclerc would have the measure of Sainz. Like Sainz is a great driver, don't get me wrong, but Leclerc has always been pretty special, and I think that as soon as he got machinery capable of winning a championship, he was always going to be doing it. I mean, that was the case the moment he got into Ferrari in 2019. He immediately had the measure of Sebastian Vettel, as far as I could see. It was just pretty obvious that the guy was something pretty special. He did special things when he was Sauber. I think it was always going to be the case that no matter what Sainz did, Leclerc was going to be, he was sort of Ferrari's boy straight from the off. And I think Sainz will have to do something pretty special not to be second fiddle. I think that was also made pretty clear when at the start of the season Ferrari came out and said, oh yes, we have no official number 1 and number 2 driver. Whenever they come out and say that, that means we don't need to have... Well, it means they don't need to. It means they don't need to designate a number 1, number 2 driver, because the performance will say it all. When a team comes out and says that, it's pretty clear that they already know what the pecking order is, and so there's no need for them to make that distinction, because, it will be obvious on track. Sainz seemed to get a bit frustrated, I think, after what was obviously a pretty difficult start on those hards as well, with cars around him on mediums. But, he went on that grass. I think he had a little bit of a movement on the grass rather than be able to keep it straight. Maybe overcorrected and ended up having a bit of a wobble, bit of a spin across the grass. It was really quite awful rejoining of the track. I mean, really dangerous. Even if he'd made it back onto the track, I think he would have got a penalty for dangerous re-entry. And it was very lucky not to hit Zhou, just about avoided him. So it was really quite an awful return to the track. And yeah, ended up in the gravel, was never going to get it out, was asking for a push. It was never going to happen. So it was a bit of a disaster for Sainz, really. That was on like lap 2, wasn't it? That was
it was lap 2, yeah.
At the beginning. So, but that was followed up by a dominant victory for Leclerc. And, he was 20 seconds in the lead, going for multiple fastest lap attempts to try and guarantee that one. And yeah, like you say, it was very much feast and famine for Ferrari